just in the interest of time.
Good. Take it
All
away.
right. All right. Welcome, everyone, to our Youth Anxiety Center webinar series for adolescents, young adults, and parents. Tonight, we're going to be covering parenting strategies on how to help your young adult cope with stress. My name is Angela Chu. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I am an assistant professor of psychology and clinical psychiatry at Walker Medicine. I am delighted to be here with Dr. Anne-Marie Albano, who actually was one of my first advisors, so this is a real treat for me. She is also a clinical psychologist and a professor of clinical psychology and psychiatry, and the founder and director of the Q-Card Clinic at Columbia University. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. We have a couple of housekeeping items that we just want to make sure we cover. If you have any questions, please refrain from raising your hand. Instead, you can type in your questions in the Q&A portal, and we'll do our best to try to get through some of those questions during our webinar tonight. And if we can't get through them all, we'll do our best to follow up with you afterwards. I do have to make a self-disclosure. Anne-Marie mentioned this earlier, but I have two young children, a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and they are not asleep yet, unfortunately. They are quite boisterous, so I apologize if they're a little bit loud or if they barge in, so please be forgiving. These are challenging times for all of us. All right, let's get on with our webinar. Shanna, can you forward the slide?
And we're really delighted that you all are here with us tonight. So thank you for joining us. We have a someone centrally located who's helping to advance slides for us as we move along. And we want to use these slides just so that, you know, we can follow in logical sequence the thoughts that we've had with the work that we've been doing with young adults over the last however many years, but specifically at the Youth Anxiety Center. So Angela?
Sure. So our Youth Anxiety Center team actually will be offering webinars on a variety of topics every Tuesday and Thursday night through May 28th. So make sure to stay alert of what we're covering and make sure to hop back on our webinars if you're interested. Today, we're going to start with a self-reflection exercise and then walk through the avoidance cycle, which really helps to explain why young adults get stuck when bad things happen. And then we're going to cover a series of strategies of how to connect with your young adult or teenager. We'll also talk about how to set appropriate expectations with your young adult, and then we'll end with a Q&A.
Great.
Shannon, can you advance that slide for me, please? Thank you. All right, so we wanted to at first acknowledge that these are just extraordinary times, right? We're all navigating uncharted territory, and all of us have had to just readjust in ways that we never imagined. COVID-19 is really an equal opportunity disruptor, and all of us have had to endure just seismic shifts to our daily routines. We're now all home. We're home all the time. And for a lot of us, our homes are our offices, our makeshift offices, if we're even lucky enough to still have work. And they're doubling up as classrooms, too, for our young adults and for our teenagers. And now even going to the grocery store, you know, is an arduous task that's emotionally charged and cognitively just really demanding. And if you're watching the news can really easily just fuel panic. The facts are really scary. And we're receiving a lot of misinformation or mixed messaging from leadership, so that can be challenging. And the reality is that viable treatments and vaccine options take time to develop. So even if you were feeling hopeful or motivated at the start of all of this, the prolonged nature of the situation is leaving everyone just emotionally drained. And if you're wondering, like, how am I going to sustain this way of living, just know that that's a really normal response right now to unusual circumstances.
Yes, and this is not like a single incident event, such as a 9/11, let's say, or for those of you who are in my age range, you know, learning about the assassination of John F. Kennedy or Martin Luther King. This is a sustained, as we said, unprecedented event that is taxing the system. And the problem, of course, is not knowing when it can end and how it's going to end. Although we do know, as Angela has said, that science and medicine, they're working very hard, and there will be medications, and there will be, in all likelihood, a vaccine within a year and a half. That doesn't mean you're sitting at home all year. So know that. But this is different than other kinds of events like a 9/11 or such that have happened in the lifetime of your children, because it is a sustained event. And when we think about it, it's really our parents and grandparents who have gone through periods of war or the Great Depression, other sustained periods of difficulty like that, unless perhaps those of you who may be listening who have come from countries, let's say, overseas, where there have been war or terrorist incidents that go on for prolonged periods of time. So this is different for us in the United States, especially. Next slide, please.
Oh my gosh.
And we're getting a little bit of difficulty with slides, but so, you know, one of the things with coping is that when it comes to coping and managing, one of the first things we have to do is take stock. We have to take stock in, given that, you know, we sort of saw this thing coming, then we heard it was really coming, and then it started arriving. And before you knew it, as March hit, all of a sudden, we have these stay-at-home orders, and we've all been staying at home, and across the country, it's been happening at different rates and such. Here in New York, I think we start tomorrow, week 8 of being at home. So the question becomes, what has changed? What has changed for any one of you? What has changed for your kids when you think about this? And some of the main things, really, if we look at 3 huge categories, what has changed, number one, first and foremost, is how much you move in the course of a day. Angela and I are in New York City, and for me in Brooklyn, I have to walk to a subway, ride a subway for an hour to get into work, walk then to get to my office, and I'm walking around, walk. And many of you across the country, whether you're signing in from Hawaii, some of you, hello way out there, or California, the middle of the country, wherever you might be, you're driving places to get to work, to bring your kids to school. There's a lot more movement than we have now by staying in our homes. And there are some folks who have, especially in New York City, 400 to 700 square foot apartments, or maybe you have more space, but nonetheless, our movement has been very much constricted. The second thing is, we're not seeing the people that we normally see. And look, I'm Italian, half Italian, so I hug a lot when I see people, you know, so there's not the social support and the connection, the physical closeness that you have from friends and extended family members. Although at the same time, you have a lot of physical closeness probably with your kids who are maybe at home with you, more than they might want to, but your social support networks have changed. You're not seeing other parents who are dropping kids off at school or going to your usual activities at the gym and various places. Your ability to connect with others at the coffee shop, whatever it might be, has now been severely limited and changed and made different. And then comes the physical spaces. And here again, some folks may have a little bit more of a sprawling type of a house environment with a backyard where you can move around and stretch your legs. And some won't have that, especially if you live in apartment buildings and places like that, where, you know, quite frankly, lots of colleagues of mine are afraid even to go into the hallway and get on an elevator to go downstairs to pick up their mail, because you never know who's in the elevator, what's happening. So there's a lot of change to the physical spaces. Where are you working? Where are your kids doing their schooling? Where are you working out? Or that, and is there privacy the way there used to be when people were able to move around and such? So these are all things that we have to bear in mind. And Angela, I'm going to apologize to you, but I can't see my slides, so I don't know who gets which slide. So we're just going with it. Next slide, please. Can we have the next slide? I think our, there we go.
There you go.
So in
this
order
one.
to cope, when we think about coping, one of the first things at a time like this that we need to do is take stock and take a second to check in and think for yourself, how has the change in your surroundings and your environment changed physically for you? Are you working at home? Are you parenting more than you're typically doing? Did your young adult come home from college and are they living with you? And the thing here to bear in mind in terms of your surroundings, your kids, whether they were in school, elementary, junior, or especially this is the young adult program that we focus on here, high school age kids are out of the house most of the day, and oftentimes more than you want them to be, even at night and weekends. And college kids are used to being away. Has this changed that now everybody is in one place at all times? Secondly, how is it affecting you that with all of these changes, what are your attitudes like? What are your feelings inside? Are you finding you're more uptight, irritable, snappy, more down on yourself, down on others around you? Are you angry? Are you grieving? Because many of us have gone through some difficult times already with illnesses in family members or maybe ourselves, and then also losses. Are your emotions then more strong and intense than they have been? Or are you finding that they're happening without your awareness? Physically, what are you experiencing? Are you more tense? Are you more feeling breathless or tightness in your chest, maybe nausea? Is it difficult for you to sleep? Are you having headaches, stomach aches? Take stock of your physical sensations and what you're feeling like there. And then finally, take a second and think for yourself, are you able to do things that you want to do within the home and within the way that your life has been limited? Are you able to rest? Are you able to get privacy? Are you able to move and do some things for yourself physically? Are you trying to keep everything in control, so much so that you're over controlling things for yourself, for your family? Are you multitasking for everybody or putting a lot of that on other people? Or for some people, have you sort of gone numb and decided, the heck with it all, I'm just gonna let it all go to heck? Because it's very important that we check ourselves along these ways to see, how is this affecting us? Because we have to understand our own feelings and get control for ourselves and put ourselves in a place where we can be comfortable within this extraordinary time, so that then we can better help our family members, especially our kids. Next slide, please. So we want to talk about taking care of you, okay? And it's very important for us, and we've been saying this, if you've seen any of the things that are out on the web that some of us have done already, or you hear about this often, this metaphor of, think about when you get on an airplane, or the idea of a mask falls from, up above you, you put the mask on yourself to breathe before you put it on your child. Well, this is where you really need to be right now. You need to take care of yourself first and foremost as the parent. Before then, you can support others in your home and those who you may be supporting out of your home. I mean, and I'll just say, I'm trying to help with taking care of parents of mine who live in Florida while I'm in New York. I have to take care of me so I can do the best I can at my job, and also help my brother and sister with taking care of parents. So we have to think about this. The first thing, and when you think about these things, we also have to think about our kids. First and foremost is all these different emotions that we're having are completely normal. And Angela and I both trained with specifically in the area of anxiety disorders. And one of the number one things we want people to understand, especially anxiety, is such a basic human emotion that at a time like this that's extraordinary, and that there is something that literally not can just harm you, but can really cause death, right? Anxiety is meant to be there to say, whoa, what do I need to do to stay safe? And so if you're more anxious, if you're more worried going to the grocery store and such, that's because your normal anxiety reactions are kicking in and saying, take a check here, put your mask on, make sure that you wash your hands before you go and come back, and so forth. Let the emotions happen because they're real and normal. The whole range of them, the irritability, the anger, all of this is normal. So don't pathologize yourself for being a human being. That's very important. And the same thing for your kids. Second thing is the more you could take care of yourself in terms of taking deep breaths and doing some relaxation, deep breathing, motivate yourself through meditation to calm down, and then making plans for how you're going to spend your day, these kinds of things. This is very important. It's important to keep as much as possible to a healthy routine and healthy behaviors in your life for you, even if your kids don't want to join you in morning yoga. Okay, this is very important for you. And it's also important to get sleep. Again, even if the kids are up and they're doing their screen time stuff with friends and what have you, you still need to get your sleep. We have also learned what's so critical is you need to focus on what you can control. Anxiety goes off the rails when we tell ourselves, oh my gosh, I can't do anything to fix this, to help myself, help my family. This is catastrophic and there's nothing I can do. Well, the reality is there's plenty that you can do, but you have to focus on what is in your control and letting go and accepting those things that are not in your control. Okay, and one of the big things to do first and foremost for taking control is stick to reputable sources of information. So I'll just say the CDC and your local medical advisors and medical schools or hospitals, listen to them. And then sticking to regular routines is important. So, I'm still getting up every morning at 6 and getting to work at my kitchen table by 8:30 in the morning. These are the things we have to do is stick to those schedules and get to sleep at your normal time. Connect with people, and we're doing it by Zoom. I've been to a wedding on Zoom, which was really cool. There's different things where there's birthday parties on Zoom now, all kinds of stuff, as much as even there are funerals that I've gone to on Zoom, because we have to do that at this point. And then secondly, one of the biggest things that will get you through all of this, as well as help your kids, is a key to being well is what we call psychological flexibility. The idea that we have to learn how to roll with some things, that we can't have everything under our control and we can't expect things to be exactly the same. No, we've got to be flexible about that so we can adapt as time goes on. Angela, if you want to add anything, or we could go to the next slide.
Let's move on to the next slide.
This little control slide that we found. And
I like this one.
yeah, this is a nice one. I mean, this really does help us if you focus on these things in the center, what your attitude is and how to manage that, turning off the news, limiting the time you spend doing this. And I know you want your kids to too. Your social distancing, following these CDC recommendations. These are all things that you could do, including finding things at home for fun and relaxation for you and your family, and also practicing kindness and grace. I mean, these are the things that we know we can control. What we can't control all around the outside is what other people do. So you can't control the fact that other people will walk around without their masks on and things. We can't predict what's going to happen. Science is working on it, but it's going to take them the amount of time it's going to take them, things like that. So focus on what you can control and let go of the other stuff. Next. And now, shifting to your teens and young adults, because you get control of you and how you're managing and you're dealing with your wellness. That, number one, gives them a model for seeing how you're coping and working through the day, but then also helps us to shift the focus to your teens and young adults, right? And we're going to do this through the course of this series of seminars that we're offering tonight, and then also through the next 2 weeks. Next slide, please.
So we just went through a reflection exercise and had you think about your own lives and how your own lives have been restricted. Think about your young adult now. How has your teenager or young adult's life been changed in terms of movement, social support, and physical spaces? What we know is that, teenagers and young adults right now are really, really stressed. They're stressed because, well, they're not going to school every day anymore. They might have had to move home, from college suddenly. Or maybe they had to move home because of a change in financial circumstances. They're no longer free to move about. They're no longer free to see their friends. They're no longer free really to do all of those meaningful, fun activities that they used to do outside of the home. And so for a lot of young adults, the most painful part is just the loss of important life experiences and all of the disappointment that comes with closures of sports seasons, theater productions, clubs, missing proms, missing high school and college graduations, or maybe just the loss of being a college student, living in the dorm, living on your own. And for those young adults who are working, they're usually the most junior in their company. So they're losing their jobs, or they're fearful of their job security, right? They're experiencing salary cuts or being furloughed. Maybe they have frozen pay. Summer internships are being rescinded right now. And the prospects of securing a job are really quite grim if you're graduating. So young adults are actually experiencing a lot of financial hardship. Their families too are experiencing unemployment, and they're making really tough decisions like, can I afford to go to college even next year? Do I have to take a gap year? Everything has really been turned upside down, and on top of this, they have the health and safety concerns that we all share. Even if it's not for them, they may be really concerned about their family members, their grandparents, the people who are more vulnerable. And there's this general sense of uncertainty about the future that makes it really difficult to plan, and it's just keeping everybody on edge. Next slide, please. Oh, thanks. So keep in mind that emerging adulthood is a transitional stage of life where separating, individuating is actually the key developmental milestone, building independence. And Anne-Marie said this beautifully the other day, that even if you have a teenager who is living at home, going to high school before, that same teenager now is experiencing much less freedom, right? Less privacy, less privilege, or the illusion of that freedom than she had before. And if you have a young adult who's come back home from college, this is a significant and abrupt change in independence and in privacy. So we want to convey that it's really normal for young adults and teenagers to experience their parents as on top of them right now, because there is truth to that. Right? And if there was stress or tension before the pandemic hit, well, staying at home in this way all the time is only going to exacerbate things. Next slide, please. So Anne-Marie talked about emotions already. Young adults are experiencing a range of emotions too, just like all of you are. They might be disappointed one minute and excited the next. And the reality is that even though they're grieving their losses, young adults also might be somewhat relieved that they're getting out of some of the commitments that they might have not wanted to keep. So if your young adult is experiencing intense emotions, like Anne-Marie said, they're normal, they're natural, they're necessary. It's just part of being a human being is experiencing these emotions. They're not bad, they're not dangerous, they're just uncomfortable, and they're reactions to the current context. The other thing is our emotions convey really important information, right? So if we're feeling sad, it's because we feel like we've lost something important. And maybe that loss is an idea like freedom, privacy, independence, or maybe it's the loss of an experience or a loss of a loved one. We feel anxiety because we're worried about, oh, something bad is going to happen. And we feel feelings like anger when we feel displeasure or believe that we've been mistreated in some way. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the cycle of avoidance, because it can really help to explain how easy it is to get stuck when we have these really intense emotions. So we'll start at the left. Bad things happen. And that's just the reality of life, right? You can make a mistake at work. You can fall in love with someone who doesn't love you back. Bad things happen to all of us. So let's imagine that we have a young adult who's a freshman in college. Suddenly the pandemic hits and he has to come home, live with his parents again. So he's probably feeling a little disgruntled. He's having to complete his classes remotely and doing his best to get by. And then boom, he gets a 20-page paper assignment that's due for his least favorite class, right? Bad things happen. And so when bad things happen, they lead to uncomfortable emotions. So now this young adult is probably feeling anxiety, feeling dread about getting this done. And when we have uncomfortable emotions, there's a strong urge to get rid of them. So it makes sense that this young adult is not going to want to work on that paper when it's time to sit down and make that outline, and instead push it aside, procrastinate, go on YouTube. Or when, you know, the parents sort of nudge a little bit, it makes sense that this young adult would say, hey, I've got it covered, you know, get off my back, right? Because it actually works really well in the short term. If you avoid, you push things off, you know, you feel some relief, but it's temporary. And if that's the only strategy that's being implemented, then this young adult is going to run into problems because, number one, it doesn't solve the source of the issue, which is that that paper still needs to get written. And then secondly, if he misses the deadline, now we're dealing with secondary problems, right? Now his grade is in jeopardy. His parents are peeved at him. He might have to meet with the teacher. And then on top of the dread and anxiety that he felt before, he's also feeling embarrassment, shame about having let things get out of hand. And that leads to just more avoidance. So this is that vicious cycle that young adults can really get trapped in. Can we get to the next slide, please? So this is the big money question. Parents are wondering, well, how do I help my young adult to cope, to get out of this vicious cycle and build appropriate skills? Next, this is you, Anne-Marie. Oh, you're muted.
Okay, there we are.
Mhm.
Yes. So yeah, I think this is why you're here, right? How do we get out of this vicious cycle? And so this is the thing, the number one thing of where to start. And I run a group for parents of young adults. It's one of our most popular groups. We have a 5-session program that we do as part of the LEAP, Launching Emerging Adult Program model at the Youth Anxiety Center. And the first thing we do, we draw from work that's been done with young children with disruptive behavior disorders. Many years ago, they found that the first thing for parents to do to help kids bring their behaviors under control and to reestablish better relationships is for the parents to meet the youth where they are. And that is to engage with your young adult or your adolescent without judging them, without questioning, without commenting on why are we doing this, or without saying, hey, let's do it this way instead of the way you want, and just say, hey, what would you like to do? And whether it's they want you to do TikTok like these people in this slide, I mean, I don't know if you've been seeing all the TikTok stuff of parents who are dancing and singing with their kids. This is great. Whether they want you to do that and they choreograph that, or it's just goofy, or whether they say, let me cook dinner and you get like some sort of mosh of pineapple and hot dogs cut up in some sauce thing, whatever, you just meet them where they're at because you are starting to just engage with them. And this is very important. Letting them take the lead at a time like this, especially in directing some of the activities you are going to do at home and how you're going to be with one another a little bit, letting that happen starts to realign your relationship with one another where they're feeling respected, and that's how you're going to get the respect that probably a lot of you want from your kids. Next slide, please.
So I already covered this. Oh, go ahead.
Yep, no, go ahead, go ahead.
No, you already covered this. That as parents, though, it's only natural to have like a strong emotional response, especially if you're seeing things unfold in terms of that cycle that we just saw, right? So it's not uncommon for parents to also feel fear, anxiety, anger, dread, resentment, confusion, sadness, the whole mix. And parents can also have really strong beliefs like, I have to solve this right away. Or, you know what, I have to intervene because I don't want my child to ruin her life. Or maybe thoughts like, my child doesn't get how much I actually do. She's just making it difficult for me. The problem, though, is that when we have really strong beliefs and strong emotions, they can get in the way of being skillful in the moment. And what we know is that those heightened emotions can actually just raise the tension, the level of tension that's in the home. So like Anne-Marie mentioned before, do your best to try not to judge yourself, your child, try not to weigh in on the future, try to show yourself some compassion and just feel comforted knowing that really any parent probably would feel the same way that you do. And that we can have these emotions. We don't have to necessarily fight them or make them disappear. And the more measured that we can be as parents, the more skillful we can be and the more helpful that we can be in guiding our young adults. Next slide, please. So do's and don'ts. Catch the positive. This is so, so, so important. The first step is noticing what your child's doing that's good and making sure you let them know that you're noticing. Say thank you if they helped. And why is that so important? Because it feels good, right, to get recognition. But it also is important because when we feel good and we get recognition, we are much more likely to do that behavior again. So make sure you catch the positive, even if it isn't perfect. And if you say something like, wow, like, I'm really impressed with how you've handled all of your coursework, even though I know it's really hard. That kind of statement can really go a long way. If things aren't working though, and you feel like you're not getting much traction because your young adult or adolescent is saying things like, you have no idea what I'm going through, you can't possibly understand, or maybe your young adult is shutting down, or there's no communication at all. Your young adult is just hibernating like a bear in his bedroom. Then it might actually be helpful just to consider whether there may be some pitfalls. And these are some of the pitfalls that a lot of parents report in our parent groups. Keep in mind that timing matters. So the same skill that backfires one moment, 5 minutes later, when the tension's not as high in the room, might actually work magically. And the second thing is that even though we care so much, how we show we care might just not work well, you know, for our adolescents and teenagers. So the first pitfall is offering reassurance without accepting how your young adult or teenager feels, or just not conveying any acceptance of their emotions. So these are comments like, oh, you know, it's gonna be fine. You don't have to worry about that. And in more harsh ways, like, okay, you just need to suck this up. This is not hard. The second pitfall is actually offering a solution and trying to fix the problem too soon in the conversation. So offering ideas like try not to think about that right now, or just take it one step at a time. Those are great ideas, but when we're in an emotional state of mind, usually that's a state of mind where we're not likely to be sensible and really logical and receive good advice. Then there's relating with personal examples, like, oh, when I was 15 years old, like, this is what I did. You might as well be from prehistoric times, so I just wouldn't even go there. And then there's the lecturing, and I actually do this all the time with my kids. If you don't do this now, you know, it's going to be harder for you later, or like, this is your life. I'm not going to be there for you for forever, helping you out. You got to take this seriously. So these statements might be true too, but it's really the last thing that our young adults and teenagers sort of want to hear when they're really upset. And the last pitfall is not conveying confidence in their capacity to cope. Saying things like, oh, this is so terrible, we might as well just like give up. And that's because it can lead them to question, like, wait, can I actually get through this? Can I endure this situation? Next. So we suggest leading with validation. And what is that? Conveying to yourself or someone else a message that what you are feeling or thinking makes sense in the context of the situation. This may feel really counterintuitive and actually unnatural, but it's actually a very important skill. And what we're recommending is not the same thing as agreement. So some parents worry about agreeing with their child. And they might say, well, my child says she's afraid about her future. I don't want to agree with that statement because I don't actually believe that. So it's not the same thing. What we're trying to convey is acceptance for what they're feeling and understanding for why they're feeling the way they do in that context. Next slide.
And just one thing to add in there is starting with validation. Sometimes the other thing, a parent may be feeling a very different emotion from the emotion the child has, your son or daughter has about a situation. So they might be upset and angry at a professor or a teacher who didn't give them a break for handing something in late. They're upset about that. You're angry that they handed it in late. Well, if you want to get to solving that, you have to first start with, I understand how you feel that way. It's validating they are upset with that professor because they were expecting the break. So you can validate that. It's not agreeing with them. And then, so what do you think then? What do you want to do? How do you want to handle this? Then it goes to moving back to putting it in their court. So, yeah.
That's a really
and
good
later
point.
talking about your anger, but not then.
And there's a lot of reasons why, right? We lead with validation. And the most important one that Anne-Marie was alluding to is that it lays the groundwork for change. It lays the foundation for change. It creates that space so that there's willingness to do something different. But it also is important because it helps your child feel understood, right? It helps your child to begin to trust his or her own emotional experiences. It decreases feelings of shame. It can help build your relationship with your young adult, and it helps them just to stay attuned to what they're feeling, which allows them to communicate their feelings too more effectively. Next, please. Okay, so what are the steps of validation? Actively listen without judgment. This is basic, but it's really hard to do, especially when we're stressed out, when we're distracted, which we all just agreed on is how we all feel in the middle of the pandemic. But try your best to pay attention, look interested, put your screens and phones away. And when you're listening, look your adult or young adult in the eye, nod, and try to refrain from any body language that conveys disapproval or displeasure. So the crossed arms, the nods, the sighs or eye rolls, all those things that you don't want your teenager and young adult to do with you when you're trying to communicate. Try to embody that and actively listen without judgment. And summarize what you hear. So this may feel awkward, but this is about paraphrasing what they're saying. So it sounds like you're really annoyed with this teacher for not giving you an extension. Is that right? And this step actually can be really helpful because it ensures that what your young adult is saying is exactly what you're hearing. And if there's any kind of misunderstanding, it gives an opportunity for you guys to course correct. It can also be helpful just to see the situation from your teenager or young adult's perspective. And in the moment when emotions are running high, it's really easy to think that, oh, my child is just trying to make things difficult for me. But it's probably not the case. It's probably more likely that they're just feeling strong emotions. And that's what's getting in the way of their ability to be effective in the moment. So try to imagine why it is that they feel the way they do, that they're acting the way they're acting, that they're thinking the way that they're thinking, and try to convey understanding towards that. And remember that the emotions are always valid. So you can say something like, oh, well, I can see how anyone in your situation would totally feel that way. Or I get that you would feel really frustrated with your teacher right now. And the last thing is to remember that you really genuinely care about your child and to express that and say, hey, I really care about you and I'm sorry, that you're stuck in the situation and that your teacher is just giving you a hard time right now. Sometimes we cover validation and parents say, well, I actually have no clue what my child is feeling or thinking. I'm just completely in the dark. And if that's the case, just take a guess. It's okay if it's not perfect. And I promise most young adults and teenagers will tell you if you're wrong, and then you can just course correct and say, oh, you're not frustrated, you're angry? That's good to know. It makes sense that you're angry. Next slide, please. So we also suggest pairing validation with statements that instill confidence. And this is because young adults, when they feel dread and feel anxiety, it's because they don't feel confident in their capacity to handle a situation. And although none of us have been through a pandemic before, they have experienced difficult situations, and they have overcome difficult situations before. So this is time to remind them about those examples. And this is the time to remind them of those traits that will help them to actually get through the challenging times now. So you might say something like, it makes sense that you feel really annoyed that your teacher is giving you a hard time. You know, I've seen you manage things like this before, fill in the blank. You know, I think you can get through this now. And just be prepared, even if you say something like this, your child may not give you the satisfaction that you're doing a good job. What you're looking for is not further escalation. What you're looking for is just more communication, and that's a big one. If it's hard to come up with the language, one helpful strategy is actually to write down a script in advance. So you're not having to come up with all of the words in the moment when you're feeling stressed. All right, next please. Anne-Marie, I think this is you.
Yeah, and one of the ways really to start rebuilding relationships, or at least sustaining yourselves and your sanity through the course of a pandemic like this, is to set clear expectations. And actually, we do this even when youth are coming home for the summer from college and such. What are the expectations for all of us being in the house for extended periods of time? And again, like we said, your high school students are more out of your house than in your house, but now they're in your house. So what are your expectations, right? If your kids are at home, as they probably are. So the big thing is to set, look, we're all going to be in this together. And what's important to us is we respect one another, and that we live the values that, you know, are important to this family. We respect one another, privacy, we respect one another's space, we respect that one another have feelings, and those feelings are valid when we have them. We help one another out, and you know, we're working together here while we are at home. So this is important. So what you want to do is say, look, let's sit down and collaborate on what and how we're going to have this time together and make it work for all of us. So it's important that you do that by saying, first, we want to hear from you. What do you need while we're all home here like this? And don't be surprised if you hear, I need you to leave me alone. I need you not to be on me all the time, to get off of my phone or my screens. You know, okay, all right. What I'm hearing then is that you want time to do your screens. We get it. So, you know, you listen to that, you validate that's important to you, but now let's talk about some of the other things we need. We do need you to complete the work you need to do. And we do need you to pitch in. And we also want to have time together. If we could go to the next slide, please. This is where you want to let your kids know, when you hear from them what they want and what they need and how you're going to help them achieve those things, then also what you need from them. And it might be as simple as, we need to do one thing a week that's just a family thing. And many families ask for that, and when the kids hear that, it's like, oh, okay. Or, you know, we need you to pitch in, you know, with helping out with cleaning, or, you know, cooking at times. Or we need you just to respect that we're all feeling stressed, and in order to minimize that stress, we have to help one another out. And some of the ways you can help us out is by picking up or doing some of the things around the house we need you to do. Next slide, please.
So this brings us to the end, which is that, you know, our young adults are resourceful, they're adaptable, and they can rise to occasion if they have appropriate support. And remember that your teenagers, your young adults, are likely feeling like they have experienced a loss of freedom, of privacy and control, and there is some truth to that. And you can help them to foster individuality and independence at home by listening to their concerns, conveying understanding, cheerleading for them, and setting clear expectations. And last but certainly not least, catch the positive and remember to acknowledge any progress that's made. So oh, go ahead.
I think there's a next slide to show what's coming up. Little question and answer for a couple of minutes, and then also the future webinars. But we have one question we can try to field right off the bat. Angela, do you see this? My son, age 13, is in front of the computer all day and night doing homework. What should I do? This is in the chat feature. And so this is very common, and especially when it comes to adolescents who are still in school, middle school or high school. You know, one of the things too to do is you do have to set boundaries and limits. And so the kids are not in school all day, which gives a little bit sometimes of a natural boundary that they know they have to get up at 6:30 in the morning, let's say, and be at school all day and then come home. That's not there anymore. So they're sleeping in maybe later and such. But what you could do is set limits on how much screen time they have that's just, you know, unstructured. And then you can certainly say, we want to, we know you're getting homework done, or we're trusting that you're getting homework done. We want to see it. You can say this to younger kids, and a 13-year-old who's probably 7th or 8th grade, I would say that. It's like, in order to help you stay at grade level and be ready for the return to school, we've got to step in a little bit more to be chaperoning a bit of this, and making sure things are getting done. So, you know, at least twice, 3 times a week, we want to be able to see what's going on so we could help you with that. And it is okay to help kids learn how to self-regulate when they're still young like that.
And Marie, we have another question that came in. My 15-year-old wants to stay up until 2 and sleeps until noon. Should I allow it? How flexible should I be?
I wouldn't be flexible on that one. And and in the sense that I would hear them out. I would start with, tell me why this is important to you. What is it that keeps you up at night? Why do you want to go to bed that late? What are you doing? Now, a lot of times what's happening is the kids are sleeping with the cell phones under their heads, and they're getting buzzed all night long with the latest TikTok or chats and things. And it's just not healthy for them, and it's not good for them. We know that. Kids need actually 8 to 9 or more hours of sleep, of solid sleep, about 8 to 9 hours, in order to function well. So this is why it's important that we keep them on school day schedules. At least, you know, from Monday through Friday, the expectation is school day schedules for our kids who are still in high school and younger. College kids, they flex a little because that's, you know, they're independent, more independent. And so one of the things you could do is, we'll give you Friday night till 2 a.m. If you are going to bed at a reasonable hour by 11:30, let's say, Monday through Thursday evening. But otherwise, the phone gets taken away at night or something along those lines. Angela, you want to take the other one?
Yeah,
Sophomore.
My sophomore just refuses to speak with me about his schoolwork. He just received progress reports and says that he's fine, and the teachers have not marked anything yet. He is angry. Yeah. So this is not the first time we've heard that teenagers and parents get into a little bit of trouble with respect to schoolwork. And sometimes parents actually are very much in the dark around what's happening with school, and they're trusting their teenagers to report back to them. So if you want to learn more, about how your young adult is doing, I really recommend going back to what we talked about before, wanting to connect with, your young adult. And first, if you're not having much communication at all, maybe try to connect with your teenager or young adult by having your teenager take the lead in doing some of the things that he or she enjoys initially, so that you can begin to repair some of that relationship, because it sounds like he's at a place where he's not ready, to talk. And the other thought that I had is to try to encourage the talking, by expressing that you'd really like to be able, to learn more about how he's doing at school, doing the best that you can to stay calm, remain calm while communicating that, and encouraging him to do so. Do you have any other thoughts, Anne-Marie?
No, I'll leave it at that because I want to get to Kara. Daughter in the mid-20s, living away from home, caught in a cycle of denial, strong emotions, trouble moving forward, taking time off college, working a low-wage job, and still needs help financially on a regular basis. and she shuts down when you try to talk to her. First of all, for all of the parents here from 13 and on up, there is a wonderful developmental psychologist named Jeffrey Jensen Arnett. And his seminal book, which is out in the popular press, is Emerging Adulthood. And it essentially is the frame that we work from. And that is that through adolescence, we're getting our kids prepared to be adults. And part of that is letting them make decisions and make mistakes, being there to offer guidance when they want it, and support in some ways, but also letting them do some things that they have to try and learn from the natural consequences of those around them, what works and what doesn't. So my point there, Kara, is that this is what defines the 20s, is floating a bit according to Arnett, that kids in the teens and 20s now are taking longer to figure themselves out, longer to find their paths to what they want to be in life, who they want to be with in life, where they want to be and what they want to do. So she sounds typical in many ways. What you can do is you can, again, set limits on what you are going to support and for how long, and let her know that, and also maybe get some counseling with her together so that you could work on a plan that isn't abandoning her and isn't like constraining her. It's again, validating and supporting her as an independent being, but also helping her to see that you have limits to what you can do for her, and she's got to take some control over her situation. And what do we want to do now?
Well, I just want to be mindful of time too, but we have one last question. And this question just more generally was about keeping schedules. And what I wanted to do is actually just make a plug for some of the future webinars that are up and coming. I mentioned at the very beginning that we'll have Youth Anxiety Center webinars every Tuesday and Thursday through May 28th. Some of them are for the young adults and some of them are for the parents. So the ones for the young adults include understanding our emotions during this challenging time, coping and keeping busy. So that has to do with the scheduling piece and how to manage time, how to create a routine. That may be a really good one to watch. Staying connected to others during social distancing, dealing with anxious or unwanted thoughts, and accepting reality and making meaning during this time. So those are the young adult webinars that I really want to plug, and they'll actually dedicate the entire webinar to that topic. So if your primary concern is about scheduling and routines, you might want to tune into the coping and keeping busy one. In terms of the parent webinars, in addition to the one that we started off with, we'll have a parent webinar next week focused on helping your young adult build independence during a pandemic. And this is really focused on Jeffrey Arnett's work. Parent coping and conflict management, that's with Anne-Marie again. And then helping your young adult navigate abrupt transitions. So we talked a little bit about that earlier, and accepting reality and making meaning during this time. So we have a lot in store for all of you. I know that we weren't able to get to everyone's questions. We'll do our best, if we weren't able to, circle back to you after this webinar and follow up. I just wanted to say thank you so much for tuning in. We're sorry for some of the tech glitches at the beginning of this webinar, but we got through to the end. Hooray. And thank you, Anne-Marie, for co-presenting with me today.
Thank you, Angela, and thank you, everybody, for taking the time to be with us tonight. We wish you all well and stay safe.
Good night.